My mother-in-law wants me to take my sister-in-law on my honeymoon, but I go alone when she shows up at the airport because my husband invited her. So, my husband Jacob, 30 years old, and I, 27, got married about a week ago. Yesterday we were supposedly going to leave for our honeymoon, but I ended up taking a flight to a different place. His younger sister, Angie, 26, showed up at the airport, and apparently, Jacob had been aware of this all along. In fact, he had invited her to come with us. To give some context, his sister Angie recently went through a terrible divorce from her ex-husband. Angie and her ex had been high school sweethearts and got married as soon as they could. They spent several beautiful years together until about a year ago, when Angie discovered that he had been having an affair for months with one of his co-workers. She tried to make it work with him even after that, but after several sessions of marriage counseling, it was her ex who filed for divorce, claiming he simply couldn't go on with it. She begged him to stay, but despite that, he left, and they got divorced. She got everything in the divorce, the house, the cars, a generous settlement, but even that wasn't enough for her because she wanted her marriage to stay intact and didn't care about anything else. I thought it was really sad and honestly felt bad for her because she was a sweet person and didn't deserve it. To be honest, no one deserves to go through that, and I had witnessed firsthand how depressed she had been in the months following the divorce. I wanted to help her, but all I could offer were words of comfort. I wanted to involve her in the wedding to keep her busy and distracted, but Jacob told me he didn't think it was a good idea because being part of a wedding like ours would only remind her that her own marriage had fallen apart. And when I thought about it, I agreed. So, I decided to just ask her from time to time how she was doing. Angie and I were never close friends, but we got along well. In fact, I could say the same about most of Jacob's family. I wouldn't say I was close to any of them, but we got along well and I never had problems with any of them, until now. But then, a day after my wedding, my mother-in-law Nora, 55, called me and said she wanted me to invite Angie to join us on our honeymoon. Jacob and I had been planning this for a long time, and I think I had been more excited about the honeymoon than the wedding, if I'm really honest. I love traveling, and so does Jacob, and we love mountain ranges in particular, so we had a full tour of the Alps planned. We had taken about 3 weeks off work and had been looking forward to this since we planned it. Now, I felt bad for Angie and would have been willing to do whatever was necessary to cheer her up, except for this. Nora told me that Angie also loved traveling and believed that going on a trip with us would help her cope with the pain, but Angie wouldn't want to come unless I invited her personally. So she wanted me to ask her and make it seem like I wanted her to come with us. But to be honest, I didn't want her to come with us. For starters, this was supposed to be our honeymoon, and I don't think it's appropriate for family to join newlyweds on their honeymoon. And secondly, I had really been looking forward to this, as the weeks leading up to the wedding had been incredibly stressful and hectic for both of us. Jacob and I had specifically taken time off so we could travel and spend quality time alone together. It didn't seem fair for Nora to ask me to give that up for Angie's happiness. I felt a bit guilty, but I had to tell Nora that I couldn't do it because it wouldn't be fair to any of us. I hoped she would understand that this was our honeymoon, and I didn't want Angie to come with us. At the time, she didn't argue with me, but she tried to convince me that this would be really good for Angie, and that I would be doing everyone a big favor by inviting her to come with us. She said she would even cover the cost of Angie's trip with us, and I didn't even have to worry about the money. All I had to do was invite her and be there for her. She was pushing hard, but still, I stood my ground and declined the idea because it wasn't fair to any of us. I could understand that it was difficult for her to deal with a divorce, but she couldn't just tag along and expect us to give up our honeymoon just to cheer her up. Plus, it wasn't even Angie who was trying to convince me to let her come. Nora believed it would be good for her to travel with us. If Angie had approached me herself, I might have even considered saying yes, but I didn't think she wanted to come with us either because she hadn't said anything about it. Even when I mentioned the honeymoon, she didn't show any interest in wanting to come with us and simply told me to have fun. That was it. So, after a few minutes of conversation and discussion, Nora dropped the subject, and it wasn't mentioned again after that. After that conversation, I talked to Jacob about what his mother had said, but strangely, he didn't react at all. He simply asked what I had told her, and I told him I had said no. When I said that, he just grunted, and that was it. No further discussion about it. In hindsight, I probably should have paid more attention to it, but at the time, I was too excited about starting to pack for our honeymoon, so I didn't focus too much on his reaction. In the week between the wedding and the honeymoon, we were busy with work because we were trying to finish everything before we left, so we didn't get the chance to meet with anyone from his family, and no one tried to contact us either. Jacob and I would occasionally talk about the honeymoon and our trip when we were home this last week, but he didn't say a word about what he had been planning until the last minute. I had no idea he had invited Angie to come with us, and I only found out when we were at the airport, and Angie and Nora showed up yesterday. Jacob and I left about 3 hours before our flight was scheduled at the airport, and while we were waiting outside and unloading our luggage from the taxis, I suddenly noticed Angie and Nora approaching us. I tried to give everyone involved the benefit of the doubt until I noticed Angie had her luggage with her. At that moment, I knew she definitely wasn't here just to see us off or accompany us. She shouted, "Surprise," very loudly and then hugged me when she got close enough. But I was still trying to process what was happening because I think I had been very clear about my feelings with Jacob and his mother. However, despite what I had said here, she was apparently ready to join us on our honeymoon. When Angie realized I looked confused and not happy when I saw her, her smile faded, and she asked if I wasn't glad to see her. I didn't even know what to say, so I just turned to Jacob for an explanation. I wanted him to tell me that he had no idea about any of this and that Nora was responsible, but instead, he told me that after I informed him about the phone call and the conversation I had with Nora the other day. He couldn't help but think about how nice it would be for Angie to come with us on the trip and have some fun to distract herself. The reason he reacted that day was that a few hours later, he went behind my back and told Angie that apparently I was the one who had suggested this idea and had invited her to come with us on the trip as a surprise for me. And he was right about one thing, it definitely surprised me, but not in a good way. I thought it was horrible and selfish of him to go behind my back and do the one thing I had told him I didn't want. I like Angie. As I said, she's a really nice person. I like her, but I like a lot of people. I'm not going to take all of them with me on my honeymoon just because it would be a nice thing to do. I don't have to do things just because it's something sweet to do, especially when it comes to something as intimate and special as a honeymoon. After Jacob told me that this was his idea and that he was the one who had invited her to come with us, something inside me exploded at that moment in front of Angie and her mother, and I told him it was simply unacceptable. I knew Angie would feel bad about it, but that was what was on my mind at the time. I told him he had gone behind my back and that I couldn't forgive him for it because it had barely been a week since our wedding, and he was already hiding things from me and lying to me. He tried to pass this off as something really small and insignificant, but to me, I had been planning this honeymoon for a long time, and I had made it very clear that I was looking forward to it. Even on the day I told him about the suggestion Nora had made, and that I didn't like the idea of inviting Angie to come just because she was feeling down. I think I had been very clear about my feelings on the matter, so this wasn't trivial or insignificant to me at all. I felt betrayed, and I was extremely upset, but he simply refused to see it that way, saying I was overreacting and making a big deal out of this. He told me that Angie would pay for herself, stay in a separate room, and only join us for certain activities, but we wouldn't be together all the time. However, that wasn't enough for me because, at the end of the day, she would still be joining us on our honeymoon, and I don't know what others think, but I really believe it's strange. If this had been any other trip, like a regular weekend trip, I don't think I would have had an issue, but asking my sister-in-law to come with me on my honeymoon was where I drew the line. After some fighting and discussion, I decided I had had enough, and since Jacob refused to take responsibility and accept that he had done something wrong, I thought I would be better off going on my own. I had already taken 3 weeks off work, and I wasn't going to let that go to waste. So, I dropped the argument, walked into the airport after telling him not to follow me, but, of course, he did. However, at that particular moment, I didn't want him near me, so I really had to shout at him to stop following me and told him that I didn't want him near me or else I would actually report him for harassment. That stopped him from following me, but I could tell by the look on his face that he was really upset and hurt by what I said. I didn't care because I was furious and just wanted to be away from him. So, once I yelled at him and he stopped following me, I decided to get myself a ticket and boarded the next flight to Miami. I was very lucky because I didn't have to wait long and was on the flight before Jacob even had a chance to change his mind about following me. Once I landed in Miami, I decided to turn on my phone and check my text messages, and I noticed that my inbox was full of messages from Jacob, Angie, and Nora. They all seemed really sorry about what had happened, but the only apology that really stood out was the one I received from Angie. She told me that when Jacob visited her a few days ago and told her that I had been suggesting she join us on our honeymoon, she could hardly believe it. Apparently, she was even about to ask me if I was really okay with it because she didn't want to intrude on our honeymoon. But Jacob was the one who told her not to ask me because he wanted it to be a surprise for me. He had exaggerated and made her believe that this was my idea. but after our argument at the airport, it became clear to her that all of this had been planned by her mother and brother. And she said she was sorry on behalf of her brother because what they had done was really stupid. And she didn't blame me for reacting the way I did because if she were in my place, she probably would have done the same. Her apology seemed genuine, and I told her it was okay. I could understand that she was going through something really difficult, and she wasn't even involved in any of this, so I forgave her. But with Jacob and Nora, it was a completely different story. Jacob was apologizing, but he was also trying to make it seem like I was the bad one here, and the same applied to Nora as well. They were trying to make me believe that they only had good intentions and that they didn't think this would bother me so much. They claimed they thought I would eventually be okay with it because I always acted like I liked Angie, and I do. I really like her, but as I said, that doesn't mean I want her on my honeymoon, and if they can't accept that, then I don't know what to tell them. Now, I know for sure that I'm not wrong here, but I still feel a bit bad, and it doesn't help that since I landed here, I've been fighting non-stop with Jacob. It's because he simply doesn't want to accept that he made a mistake by going behind my back, and that this wasn't the right thing to do. I understand and really respect the fact that he loves his family so much, and is willing to make sacrifices for them. But I think it's extremely unfair to expect me to make the same sacrifices for his family. Not to mention that I am now also his family, and he owes me certain things. It just seems like my happiness doesn't mean as much to him as his family's happiness does. And it feels really petty to make it seem like a competition, but that's how it feels. If he really valued my happiness as much as he values his sister's, maybe he wouldn't have gone behind my back and done the one thing I asked him not to do. We've been fighting, and it's been really bad, because we've only been married for a week, and we're already off to a bad start. We've been together for almost 7 years before this, and I feel terrible right now because something like this has never happened before. We've always had a relatively normal relationship, and yes, of course, like any other couple, we've had fights, but none of this magnitude. And I just don't know how to deal with this. He insists that his heart was in the right place, and that I really need to understand that. He claims that if Angie had joined us on the honeymoon, it wouldn't have ruined anything for me, but it would have meant a lot to her and might even have saved her from getting worse in the future. And I can't explain to him that having Angie join us on our honeymoon would have ruined things a bit without sounding like a really terrible person and the kind of wife who wants to separate her husband from his family. But I promise you that's not the case. Logically, I know I'm not the bad one here, but all the fighting with my husband has made me feel like I'm losing my mind, and I have absolutely no idea how to move forward. Am I the bad one for leaving my husband at the airport and canceling our honeymoon when I found out that he had invited his sister to join us on our trip? Update 1. I'm still in Miami and have been exploring a lot. This is my first time here, and many of you suggested some places I should visit, and I've been doing exactly that to distract myself. I still haven't been able to work things out with my husband because Jacob is being very stubborn. He's holding on to whatever it is he believes. And he honestly thinks that having Angie with us on the honeymoon wouldn't have been different. He's so convinced of this that it took me reading all the comments here to realize that I wasn't going crazy and that he was being unreasonable. I don't understand why he doesn't get it when even Angie herself has acknowledged that it would have been strange. He's been texting me, but I've given up trying to explain things to him. I've been arguing for a while, but I completely wasted the last few days I've been here, staying in my hotel room and fighting with him. I've spent enough time trying to make him understand, but I can't help him if he refuses to recognize the obvious. The worst part of this is that I can't even fully enjoy myself because, in the back of my mind, I keep thinking about Jacob and what I'm going to say to him when I return. I can't avoid him forever, and we're literally married, so we can't just separate and end everything. My whole existence feels heavy, and I don't know, I just feel like everything is going wrong right now. I've talked to my parents about it, but they really don't know what to do. They just advise me to do what feels right, and that they will support me, and I guess that's helpful, knowing they'll be on my side no matter what. But I can't help feeling like everything is falling apart, and the fact that it's been less than a month since our wedding is what makes everything even harder to handle. I know it's really easy for people to tell me that this is a huge red flag, and that I should leave my husband, divorce him, and end everything, but in reality, it's not that easy. And I'm not even talking about the legal process of divorce. I'm talking about the emotional and mental toll it takes. I don't know what I'm going to do. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea, and I don't even know what to expect. Update 2. I came back from Miami a couple of days ago, and I don't know, things haven't been good so far. The day I returned, I came back to an empty house because Jacob wasn't here. I spent 3 weeks in Miami, and after 2.5 weeks, he stopped texting me. Even the last few messages he sent me still insisted that he had no bad intentions and that I needed to reconsider what I was doing. When I came home, I finally decided to respond to him and let him know that I was back here. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just felt like I had to tell him because then at least something would happen. I couldn't stand the uncertainty of not knowing what the future held, and I felt like I just had to talk to him. So, the day I told him I was back here, he replied saying he would come the next day and we could talk. I thought it was a good sign and we would finally reach an agreement. But when he came the next day, we were still stuck talking about the same things. We kept arguing over who was overreacting and who was wrong. He kept saying that I shouldn't have reacted the way I did in front of Angie and that I shouldn't have made such a big deal out of this because I should have trusted him since he would never do anything to jeopardize our relationship. But the fact that I was against something as silly as having Angie join us on our honeymoon, which was nothing more than a glorified vacation, made him feel like I was being a bit too dramatic and didn't need to act so crazy about it. I thought it was really unfair. I had already told him before how I felt about Angie joining us, but he completely ignored it. More than Angie being part of our honeymoon, I had a problem with him going behind my back and lying to me. In fact, not only did he lie to me, but he also lied about me when he told Angie that it was my suggestion for her to join us on our honeymoon. I would love for her to be happy, but not at the expense of my own happiness. And I don't think there's anything selfish or cruel about that, as he was trying to portray it. If anything, he was the selfish one, because he couldn't be bothered to think about my feelings and only cared about being the good guy for his family, but not for me. It made me feel like he was telling me that I wasn't worth it, and it was a really awful feeling. Also, there was the fact that he was currently living in a hotel because he said he hadn't even left after finding out that I had left without him. He told me that after I stopped responding to his messages, he was tempted to go and file for divorce because he thought I was taking things too far. I thought that attitude was out of place because he was the one who messed up. We argued a lot, and to sum things up, there was absolutely no improvement in our situation. He keeps saying that I don't have a brother, so I don't understand why this is so important to him. And well, maybe that's true. I will never personally understand what it's like to have a brother and care about him so much. But you know what? Several people in the comments on this post have brothers, and they told me this was going too far. So yes, maybe he's the one who's wrong, and he's just trying to make me believe I'm the one who's overreacting. Whatever the case, I'm not letting myself be fooled by any of this. I've made the decision that if he doesn't apologize soon, then maybe I just need to talk to my lawyer and prepare for a divorce. If he apologizes, that's another story. I've been thinking about couples therapy, but that will only happen if he approaches me in the next few days and says he's sorry for everything. At this point, it seems very unlikely just because of how he and Nora are the only ones who think that what he did was completely fine and that I'm the one taking this too seriously for no reason at all. But Angie, the person they're fighting so hard for, is actually on my side in this. She's reached out to me several times to say that she's been trying to explain this to both Nora and Jacob, telling them that what they did was a betrayal and simply wasn't right. But they're not even willing to listen to her, which shows that it's more important for them to be right, even more than doing the right thing. I really don't know what to think anymore because this situation is ridiculous. I thought I married a sensible and amazing man, but right now, I don't feel like he's the same person I married. I have so many conflicting feelings, and talking about it here helps me make sense of it, at least a little. I just want a resolution to this. It's becoming really exhausting, and I can't keep dealing with this drama all the time. Update 3. Hi everyone, so this update has been a long time coming. I haven't posted anything here for the last 2 months because I've been going through a terrible divorce. I decided to give Jacob a chance and suggested couples therapy a few days after my last update here. He expressed that he wanted to work on our marriage and that he wasn't ready to give up yet. Jacob said he wasn't ready to let me go and wanted to resolve our issues. So after much deliberation, we both decided to try couples therapy. But as you might imagine, it didn't help. We were perfectly fine during the sessions in the presence of our therapist, but as soon as we left, we would start fighting again. And it felt like we were just wasting time during the therapy sessions. Still, we didn't give up. We attended sessions for almost a month until we finally gave up, because it just didn't make sense to keep attending the sessions and resolve everything there while still fighting in real life. He wasn't ready to accept that he was being a bit extreme with the family issue, but at the same time, he was forgetting that I was also his family. And I wasn't okay with living a life like that, where I would always come second. So we both agreed that it would be best if we just separated. It sounds easy, but it was an incredibly difficult decision to make, and we were both devastated that this wasn't going to work out. We mutually filed for divorce, and right now we're in the negotiation phase. At this point, I don't even care what I get from the divorce. I just want it to be over so I can move on with my life and pretend this never happened. I've been seeking individual therapy for myself because it's really crazy what I'm going through here, and I really think it could help to process everything that's happening. My parents and friends have been incredibly supportive, and I'm so grateful for that because they're the only ones who are really making all of this easier. I know a lot of people are whispering about me and how my marriage fell apart in less than a year, but honestly, I don't even care. What matters is that the people I care about are on my side and think I did the right thing. As long as I have that, I'm not too worried about what happens in the future. I'm just going to work and focus on myself now. Sure, it's going to be a couple of emotionally painful months, but people have been through worse and survived, and I have hope for the future. Update 4. Hi everyone, I wanted to share a little update on how things are going. After everything that happened with my divorce, I've been taking some time for myself, focusing on healing and recovering emotionally. I've been going to therapy regularly, which has been very helpful in sorting through the thoughts in my head. Recently, I met someone new. It's someone I met through work. He's not a coworker, so I think that's fine. He seems to be a very kind and understanding person, and we've been spending time together informally, although it increasingly feels like a formal relationship. Although I feel attracted to this new person, I'm being very cautious and taking things slowly. After my previous experience, I'm determined not to rush into anything and to make sure this relationship is based on open communication, mutual respect, and genuine commitment. What has struck me the most is that this person seems to have a very balanced perspective on family relationships. He doesn't seem like someone who would prioritize his family over his partner, which is something I value greatly after what I went through with my ex-husband. Of course, it's too early to say where this relationship is going, but I'm keeping an open mind and enjoying the process of getting to know someone new. As for my ex, the divorce ended without many issues, and we were able to settle the division of assets without much argument. As for his mother, Nora, she called me a couple of times to offer half-hearted apologies, trying to mend our relationship. But instead of doing so sincerely, deep down it sounded like she still thought all of this was my fault. It's like she still can't see her mistake in all of this. I'm still in touch with Angie, and we talk from time to time. I wouldn't say we've formed a friendship, but we get along and chat occasionally. In the end, I think I'll miss her as a sister-in-law, but I'm happy to distance myself from the rest of his family.